I let my in-laws stay with us temporarily, but they had no intention of leaving. My wife knew the truth the entire time. I, 36M, never thought I'd be the guy posting on this sub, but here I am. 2 years ago, my wife and I made what seemed like a reasonable decision at the time, letting her parents stay with us after they sold their house. It was supposed to be for just a few weeks until they found a new place. Those few weeks turned into 2 years of hell, and I finally snapped last weekend. Now everything's blown up, and I'm not sure if I'm the bad guy here. When this all started, we were in a good place. We'd been married for 7 years, had a 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood, and both had stable jobs. My wife's parents had just sold their home because they wanted to downsize and move closer to us. The plan was for them to stay with us while house hunting in our area. It'll be a month, tops, my wife promised. They just need somewhere to stay while they look for the perfect place. I agreed because, well, they're family. The first red flag appeared when they showed up with enough belongings to fill a small apartment. Not just suitcases. We're talking furniture, kitchen appliances, and boxes of decorative items. They explained they'd put most of their stuff in storage, but wanted to keep essentials with them. Within a week, the guest bedroom had been completely transformed. Their furniture replaced ours, their pictures went up on the walls, and somehow their cooking utensils migrated to our kitchen drawers. My mother-in-law started organizing our pantry and rearranging the furniture in the living room because it made more sense that way. When I mentioned this to my wife, she brushed it off. They're just trying to feel at home. It's temporary, remember? A month passed, then 2. When I asked about house hunting progress, my father-in-law would wave his hand dismissively. The market's not right, or nothing meets our standards. My mother-in-law would chime in with, we're not going to rush into something we'll regret. Meanwhile, they settled into a routine that increasingly pushed us to the periphery of our own home. My father-in-law took over the garage for his workshop, relegating my car to the driveway regardless of weather. My mother-in-law commandeered the kitchen, criticizing how I loaded the dishwasher or stored leftovers. They'd invite their friends over without telling us, and I'd come home to find strangers in my living room. 6 months in, I tried to have a serious conversation with my wife. This isn't working, I told her. We need to set a deadline for them to find their own place. She got defensive immediately. They're my parents. They need our help right now. The housing market is terrible. We agreed to a few weeks. I reminded her. It's been half a year. So what's your solution? Throw them out on the street. This became our new normal. Circular arguments that never resolved anything. I'd bring up my concerns. She'd accuse me of being selfish, and nothing would change except the growing tension between us. By the 1-year mark, I was sleeping in the home office because my father-in-law's snoring echoed through the house, and I needed to be functional at work. My wife and I barely spoke except about logistics or in front of her parents. Our house no longer felt like mine. Family photos had been replaced with theirs, the basement was filled with their storage, and even my favorite chair had been moved to make room for my father-in-law's recliner. I tried to be reasonable. I suggested helping them with a down payment on a condo. I emailed them listings in their price range. I even offered to help them move. Each attempt was met with excuses or outright dismissal. We can't afford that on our fixed income. That neighborhood isn't safe. The stairs would be too much for your mother-in-law's knees. The worst part was watching my wife transform into their enabler. She'd defend every unreasonable demand and excuse. When they decided to renovate our guest bathroom without asking, yes, seriously, she thanked them for improving our home. When they complained about the neighbor's dog barking, she called animal control instead of having a neighborly conversation first. I felt like I was losing my mind. Friends started inviting us out less because my in-laws would often insert themselves into our plans. Date nights became family dinners. Weekend trips were postponed because mom and dad would be lonely. My home office gradually filled with their overflow possessions until I was working from a corner of my own desk. At the 18-month mark, I had a breaking point moment when I found my father-in-law had dismantled my workbench in the basement to make room for his collection of model trains. Things I'd built with my own hands, projects I'd been working on, all moved or thrown away without my knowledge or consent. I confronted him, and his response floored me. Well, you weren't really using it properly anyway. That night, I told my wife we needed to have a serious conversation, alone, away from the house. We went to a coffee shop, and I laid it all out. This can't continue. I'm miserable in my own home. I feel like a guest. No, less than a guest. Guests get respect. I need to know, when are your parents actually planning to leave? She looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. The thing is, they're on a fixed income now. The housing market has gotten so expensive. They're not sure they can afford their own place anymore. What about the money from selling their house? I asked. More avoidance. Well, they've had some expenses. It hit me then. They had no intention of leaving. Ever. This had been the plan all along. I took a deep breath. I want them out by the end of the month. They need to find their own place, or we need to seriously discuss our future. She erupted, right there in the coffee shop. Called me selfish, heartless, cruel. Said I never liked her parents. Said I was trying to tear apart her family. Then the kicker. They put most of the money from their house into our mortgage as a gift. They've been paying to live with us this whole time. I froze. What are you talking about? What gift? What payments? Her face changed as she realized I didn't know. Apparently, she and her parents had made an arrangement without telling me. They'd contributed a lump sum to our mortgage, not paid it off, just reduced it, in exchange for living with us for the foreseeable future. This wasn't a gift, it was a purchase. They had bought their way into our home, and my wife had let them. I walked out, spent the night at a hotel, turned off my phone because it wouldn't stop ringing. I needed space to think. When I came back the next day, they were all waiting for me, my wife and her parents, sitting in the living room like some kind of intervention. My father-in-law started talking about family obligations and how I was being unreasonable. My mother-in-law cried about how they had nowhere else to go. My wife just sat there, looking torn. I stayed calm, asked them exactly how much they had contributed to our mortgage. The number was significant, about 30% of what we owed, but nowhere near enough to justify permanent residency. I then asked a question that silenced the room. If this was always the plan, why wasn't I part of the conversation? Why hide it from me for 2 years? The uncomfortable silence was broken by my father-in-law, who said, "We knew you'd react like this." That's when I lost it. Not yelling or anything dramatic, but I laid out exactly how I felt about the situation. How they had systematically taken over our home, disrespected my boundaries, and conspired with my wife to essentially trick me into a living arrangement I never agreed to. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "I'll buy out your share of the mortgage. You'll have 3 months to find somewhere else to live. This is non-negotiable." My wife started to object, but I cut her off. "And you and I need to decide if we still have a marriage worth saving, because right now, I'm not sure we do." That was 4 days ago. The house has been eerily quiet since then. My in-laws are suddenly looking at apartments online. My wife has been alternating between tearful apologies and accusations that I'm tearing apart her family. I've been sleeping in the guest room and consulting with a financial advisor about how to handle the mortgage situation. I don't know if our marriage will survive this. The betrayal runs deep. Not just the arrangement itself, but 2 years of dismissing my feelings and gaslighting me about the situation. Even now, she doesn't fully understand why I'm upset. She keeps saying she was just trying to help her parents, and that I'm making too big a deal out of this. Am I, though? Am I wrong to feel blindsided by an arrangement that fundamentally changed our living situation without my consent? Should I have been more understanding about her parents' situation? I genuinely don't know anymore. Update. It's been a week since my last post, and I wanted to update you all since so many of you offered advice and support. First, thank you to everyone who validated that I wasn't crazy. After years of being told I was overreacting, your comments helped me stand my ground. My wife and I had several long conversations, some more productive than others. She finally admitted that her parents had planned this from the beginning. They'd been struggling financially for years, but were too proud to tell us. When they sold their house, they didn't have enough for retirement and a new place. My wife knew this and agreed to let them stay without telling me the full story because she was afraid I'd say no. "I thought you'd come around once they moved in," she said. "I didn't expect you to be so upset about it." I pointed out that hiding major financial and living arrangements from your spouse is a fundamental breach of trust. She broke down and admitted she'd been wrong, but still defended her intentions. As for my in-laws, they've been conspicuously accommodating this past week. Suddenly they're looking at senior apartments and talking about not wanting to be a burden. Amazing how clear things become when boundaries are firmly established. I met with a lawyer and a financial advisor. We're working out a way to repay my in-laws for their contribution to our mortgage without financially crippling ourselves. It's going to be tight for a while, but worth it for my sanity. My wife and I are starting marriage counseling next week. I'm not sure if we can rebuild the trust, but I'm willing to try. She seems genuinely remorseful now that she realizes how close she came to losing me. My in-laws have given us a timeline. They'll be out within 2 months. I'm cautiously optimistic, but not holding my breath until I see moving trucks. The hardest part in all this has been realizing how easily my feelings and needs were dismissed by people who are supposed to care about me. It's a tough lesson, but one I needed to learn. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. I'll update again once they're actually gone. In the meantime, I'm reclaiming small parts of my home. I moved my chair back where I like it. I put our family photos back on the mantle. Baby steps, but it already feels more like home again.